Thank you so much for coming, everyone. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here right now, and I really appreciate it. We're going to talk about some heavy things, some hopefully interesting and important things, and yeah, we're going to discuss something that I think a lot of us has done in our careers. You know, everyone has published a piece of art, everyone's published a game, everyone sat there looking at that publish button and then wondering what would happen after you do it. And hopefully not a lot of you had to do that and wonder if you would go to prison for it, or somebody that is close to you would go to prison for it, your family, your friends. And yeah, we're going to dissect that today. Just a disclaimer, you know, you're about to see some things you're not going to be able to unsee, but probably even worse, you're going to hear some things that you're not going to be able to unhear. But they're meant to, believe it or not, uplift and elevate and hopefully empower, and I really hope that that shows through. But without further ado, we're going to start with an art piece that we're going to be dissecting and kind of making our way towards throughout this lecture. So I'm kicking it off.
Видел ее лицо, когда она сообразила, что это не ее подарок.
Жаль, все пропустил.
Краснела она. Стояла там, красная, как помидор.
Ребенок, ты почему забрала подарок мальчика?
Я думала, это мой подарок.
С чего ты так взяла?
Ну, потому что все подарки для меня.
Может, хватит уже покупать ей подарки?
Может.
Не хватит.
Что там такое? Тут проезд заблокирован. Что случилось?
Папа, что это за дядя?
Эй! Отсюда!
Зачем они бьют машину?
Тихо!
Это бандиты?
Не знаю! Доченька моя, ты меня слышишь? Делайте!
Машина, сука! Руки за! Не двигайся, стой! Круто, прочь, сука! Дома надо было сидеть, бля! Руки за спину! Ребенок! Машину, ребенок!
Папа, папочка, помоги мне, пожалуйста.
Разбил машину. Приезжай, быстрее! Выйди с машины! На каком основании? Я сказал! На каком основании?
Thank you. Thank you. Very kind. Sorry you had to experience that. And the truth is that I don't like this piece. I don't like it for so many reasons. You know, part of me doesn't like it because I'm more used on working on stuff like this, you know, or like this. But I think fundamentally, though, oh, sorry, I'm gonna just try to make it a little quieter. But fundamentally, I think I, well, resent it in so many ways because, well, it had to exist in the first place. And so, I'm gonna skip to the next slide. But yeah, the whole premise that we had to, make something like this is terrifying to me, and I find it extremely unfortunate. And despite just a million of artistic things that I would change about that, there's just that whole concept that we're going to discuss of why this needs to exist in the first place. Not, the little incremental steps, but just the whole reasoning. And so I'm going to try and do something a little bit unconventional for me. Like, this is my 10th time coming to GDC, and I think this is my 15th time speaking, and I never, ever talk about myself. And mostly that is because I've met all of you guys, and you are a huge inspiration, and I know how tricky it is to make video games. You have to be all kinds of crazy to decide that that's what you want to do for a career, and so trying to be of use and trying to be informative has always been my focus. But I felt like in order to give enough context on making art in circumstances that leads you to create you something like this, it would hopefully be useful to go back. And in my case, it's going back right back there to the town called Minsk in Belarus, which is now a staging place for the invasion in Ukraine, and where I was born a little while back. And so what I'm going to try and do is basically walk you through an experience of what it's like living there, paralleled with the art that I made over that time, and just have them side by side, just so that you hopefully get a little bit of a perspective as we make our way to production of the piece you've just seen. And so it starts actually quite optimistic. So this is the first piece of 3D art that I've ever seen, and I was so into it. And the exciting part is that literally my entire art career hinges on a lie. Like, a friend of mine in 5th grade brought this in and said, "Hey, I made this. I'm taking whatever 3ds Max classes." Turned out just a standard image that comes with 3ds Max, and he was full of shit. But I got so excited that I went to some flea market, find a pirated copy of 3ds Max, and then there's not a lot of internet in 2001, and so I just clicked on all the buttons. I was trying to figure out how to make it work. But at the same time, the sort of the background to a lot of my life and what was happening on TV was a lot of this. And 90s, post-USSR, it was in general a mess, but there's just a lot of things happening politically with, I guess, a blooming dictatorship that Belarus was becoming. And so I didn't understand much of it. I just remember, this on TV, and then a lot of this people walking around with portraits of people that have disappeared. And so those names are kind of seared in a lot of people's memory, I guess. And those people were disappeared by the government for their public activity, I guess. And so that was kind of the background of what's happening, and this was my foreground. Funny thing is, 20 years later, 3ds Max almost looks the same. But this was actually 3ds Max 4. I started with 5, still looks the same. But anyway, and so after poking around for a bunch of years and trying to figure out how it works, I started coming up with something. And so it took me a few years to figure out some V-Ray, learn how to model. I had to scan all of my books that I had at home for the shelves, because no texture libraries back then, or at least not with dial-up internet. And so it was a process, but something exciting happened, right? That revitalized and re-energized my passion for this, which is this thing. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I highly recommend Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. Saw it, blew my mind, and I immediately went on the internet, found a Final Fantasy community, find other people that were super into it, found another guy that did 3D, and we were like, well, obviously we're making a sequel to this, just the two of us, let's go. And we tried. Didn't quite work out, because we sucked. But the only thing I think that survives is I have this one image that I put together way back when. But I figured, might as well try to find some nuggets of wisdom in how this all transpired. And so that was an interesting lesson, because I really held close that failure at making a sequel to Final Fantasy VII Advent Children with just another dude. And I kind of came back to it over time, just for personal art pieces I would do over the years. And it was really exciting to me because it was just motivating. It was a driver sort of just giving me energy and propulsion to try things. But at the same time as I was doing that, I distinctly remember this next video that is just seared into my memory. And this is once again a protest for one of those people that was disappeared, where his family and his wife were basically demanding accountability from the government. And then this lovely policeman just hits that lady across the face. And this was the first time in my life that I felt appalled and enraged, even though I was 14, but that sense of like, oh, something isn't right with the world, and it makes me want to break things. And I don't know, it's unfortunate to live with, but you kind of feel very helpless in these situations, right? And so you kind of carry it with you. And I guess the heartbreaking part is that this video is from 2020 in Belarus. So, not too many things changed. But we're going to get back to that guy in just a little bit. But going back to art, I decided to enroll myself into an art school as like last year of high school. And I just showed up and I was like, I'm gonna make art here. And they were like, no, you're not. Like all of the kids have been here for like 10 years and whatever. And so the fascinating thing that I discovered is that if I'm really passionate about something, I can just, ask questions like, okay, what do I need to do for you guys to let me in? And then they were like, well, you can come here every day for your entire summer holiday and like try to paint or draw. And if it's half decent, we'll let you in. Sure, worked out. And that was like such a fascinating lesson that having something to love can just give you enough energy and motivation to just be like, yeah, there's nothing impossible. Just tell me what to do. If somebody says no, it's not never. It's just like, okay, like what next? How do I fix this? And so another interesting discovery from that time. But then that was contrasted by this fascinating story. And this is when I was in my last year of high school. This is a protest in the streets of Belarus. And I don't know if many of you speak Russian here. Probably not, but okay, I'll have to give you a little bit of context. So these protesters occupied the square where they were kind of hanging out, set up a little tent town. And obviously there was no sanitation provided by the government, no porta potties for the demonstrators. And so the demonstrators used the sewers to do their, bathroom business. And then in the middle of the night, the government staged a covert operation to go in and weld shut all of the sewers. And so people were protesting with like these banners that basically said, let us poop. And it was glorious, but at the same time, very ironic because these people were like, putting their lives on the line to try to secure freedom for their country. And it's fascinating because this was also like my first experience firsthand with a protest. Because I just remember driving somewhere in a car with my dad. And we stopped by this like rotisserie chicken kiosk and he just like bought 5. And I was like, well, someone's really hungry. And then we rolled up to there and he just walked out and like just sort of distributed food in that tent town. And it was the first time that I was at a protest as a kid. It was, I don't know, I didn't know what to make of it aside from it felt like we were doing the right thing, But then obviously a few days later, everyone was arrested, the square was clear, and I imagine the sewer caps were unwelded. But yeah, so that was kind of happening in the background at the same time as graduated high school, and I tried a year of college, because in Belarus, and it's important context for the rest of the story, if you don't get a higher education, you go to the army. You're conscripted, you have to serve 2 to 3 years in the type of army that now is marching across Ukraine, which is not a good time. And obviously I had zero interest in it. And so I was like, okay, let's give it a go. The other interesting thing is doing a year at an art school taught me that apparently all of these people that teach art in, especially back in Belarus, can't really be trusted with my passion for art because they don't care about the things that I care about. They have their own different perspective on art. And so I decided to take something as far as possible from art to pursue and then do art in my spare time. And so I enrolled in like international affairs and politics or something. And then I was doing art at night every night to a point where I got really sick, ended up in a hospital because I wasn't sleeping. And then when I came back to school, I promise it's going somewhere. When I came back to school, I had to like go to the dean and talk about like retaking one of the exams. And the moment he saw me, he just like, okay, to my office. I was like, okay, let's see where that goes. And he basically told me that I will not graduate this school unless I cut my hair and shave my beard. To which I told him, no. And he called my Japanese class teacher and basically in front of me told him to like, don't let him pass the test until he gets his haircut. I took the test 8 or 9 times. And eventually they were just like, okay, fuck it, let's just let him be. But that's just an example of, I guess, a society that embraces conformity instead of free thinking, but also sort of the, I guess, the space to roam when creativity is important to you and self-expression and stuff like that. So I felt like it was an interesting story to mention, but the truth of it was that this was my real education. And that was Polycount circa 2004, I believe. And that was an online community. And so I think that just like GDC is sort of the best venue to meet people that are passionate about what you're passionate about, have these conversations, learn together, inspire each other. And the internet gave us that opportunity. And it was like heaven, because there were actual artists working in video games that I could talk to, harass and pester with all of my questions. And that's what I was doing with all of my time, pretty much, while going to school, until I eventually decided to drop out. It's obviously not for me. And so here's some more art. I was taking like freelance commissions. Never got paid for any of those. Like every time, people would just like screw me over because I was 16, working on the internet from Eastern Europe with no like internet banking or anything like that. So it's a long story. Made some album covers for cool bands. If you guys look up Lights Fall From Behind, still a sick album. And then yeah, here's the interesting story from there that I guess is a good life lesson. So as I was desperate for a job, having dropped out of college, I was applying to like the 3 companies that did anything to do with computer graphics in Belarus. And I got a test from one of them, and I did the test, and I came in, and they gave me feedback, and the feedback seemed funky. Like I went back, and I like posted on Polycount, like, hey, you guys, does that make sense? And literally people were like, yeah, it makes no sense. Or I think the quote was, I Googled what you're asking for, and it just took me back to this thread, which means that it was just nonsense. But it was an interesting experience for me because especially, coming from a country that embraces both conformity and obedience, trying to constantly think about questioning authority and trying to have a community to support you and always thinking, okay, is whatever the person in a position of power or privilege over me right now, do they actually know better, or are they just in that position? And so I ended up turning down that job, and a couple of months later landed a job at Wargaming, and I basically just wore them down. They didn't want to let me work there because I was 17, and so I sent them a portfolio, another portfolio. First one they ignored, second one they're like, okay, decent for 17, but like, come back in a few years. And so I was like, okay, I was working on another one, and then I noticed that they posted an actual 3D artist position, and it had an art test, and I sent them like this yay big letter of like, don't you dare hire anyone until I finish this art test. And if for some reason it was written in like ye olde Russian. And when I got hired, I found like a forum thread inside the company where people just laughing their asses off and saying like, yeah, hire this guy. Doesn't matter if he knows anything. So I guess that paid off. But I guess fundamentally, right, it was that same lesson of like, oh, if somebody says no, it's just like, well, what do I have to do, And yeah, so made some art, finally working at a game studio, mostly tanks. I know way too much about tanks. 10 years later, it is still space in my head that I'm never getting back. But the game was okay. I think like 500 million people played it or something, so I think we did all right. But then I actually learned a very interesting lesson, which is that this art being, my life in so many ways, it wasn't the same for a lot of other people. And that was like another big discovery for me, because I was like, oh, for some people it's just a job. How can it be just a job for someone when it's the coolest thing on the planet that we get to do every day, and somebody pays us money for it? Like, it was just ridiculous to me. But back then I was just kind of sad and disappointed. And I was like, oh, why don't people care more? And obviously, now I know better, just mostly about, how organizations work and how you can, facilitate change and be supportive and encouraging. And it was a fascinating lesson. And I think looking back at it, the one thing that I'm realizing now is that if you feel like you care more than other people, it's not a bad thing. Care enough for everyone. That's great. Just do your best work and be there to support other people and not, expect them to do something. Just do the best you can do, and magical things will happen. But okay, here's a fun story. So around that time, right, because I dropped out of university, so I was still eligible for Army. I had to figure out how not to go to the Army. And this is an actual website right now, and not something I used, but just to give you an example, where you can buy diplomas online, all kinds of papers, like that you're working somewhere, studying somewhere, just like you would for whatever use case you might have for them. And so I didn't quite use those, but we had some relatives of relatives in Russia that like sent me a stamped piece of paper, and then I just used some Photoshop and like just made a thing that said I study at a university somewhere in Russia, and it just brought it in. I was like, oh, I'm in another country. Sorry, like I promise I'm not eligible for conscription. And so it was good to like put to use my Photoshop skills, you know, like I wasn't working for nothing. And yeah, and so got back to making art and just making environments. Once again, on Polycount, this was a contest in 2009. You know, just normal maps are all the rage, as much specular as possible, like sculpt every tile on the pavement. And as you can tell, overabundance of noise and detail because I didn't know how to do art. I just knew how to do detailed things. But you know, it was still an interesting time, and I was just working towards my portfolio. At that point, I was like, okay, I have this dream studio that I want to work for, right? I was like, I'm going to go to Rockstar, and you know, I'm going to make some GTAs. It's going to be so much fun. So I took like a section of Vice City, remade it in UDK, which was like a version of Unreal 3, you know, back in the day for someone who missed that. Yeah, and I was just like, well, I'm ready, you know, like Rockstar any minute, like you can call me. And I applied through their website, and they had this thing where they said, your application is submitted, go have a beer. I went and had a beer, and I still have the cap from that beer on my desk every day because they never got back to me. And I sat there for a month waiting. And it was amazing because it was just like a very humbling experience, just like reminding you that, hey, life is hard, and we'll get there. But something happened around the time. And this is, to me, honestly, in all of this, is the worst story, the one that's like hard to tell. So if I choke up a little bit, I apologize in advance. But this is just a bus stop in Minsk, right? And it's not the actual bus stop where this story happened. The actual bus stop was right across the street. Couldn't find a picture. But I was at a bus stop, getting home, trying to catch a bus, and I was standing there with a bunch of people, and then there's this guy walking towards me just down the street. And then all of a sudden, this blue van with no license plates stopped behind him. Two men jumped out, kind of just twisted his arms and threw him in the van and drove off. And everyone at the bus stop just kind of looked at each other and then proceeded to pretend like we didn't see anything. And to me, that was the hardest part, because you always think like, oh, when you're in a dangerous environment, you know, there's like a dictatorship or bad people, they can do all of these things to you physically, but you don't take a moment to think what kind of person it takes you turning into to be able to tolerate it, to be able to survive in that environment and ignore all of these things that are going on around you. And to me, that was the hardest part. That was the first time where I was like, oh, I don't think I could ever like do it. Like and yeah, I don't know whatever happened to that guy. I still feel guilty for not doing anything. And at the same time, I realized that if I can't be in a position where I can help, then I don't want to be in a place where I'm forced to make that decision. But yeah, I don't know. These thoughts, I guess, still sort of percolate here. But okay, here's another funny story. And so that's kind of like that paper that I forged to say I'm studying at some other school. A year has passed, and I got a call from police. And they're like, oh, can we please speak to Andrew, please? And I'm like, oh, he's not here. He's in Russia studying in school. And the gentleman from police was like, oh, we just called that university. They told us nobody by that name ever studied there, so he needs to come to the police station. And I was like, well, I'll tell him if I see him, you know. Put down the phone, and he thought that I was my younger brother. And so I put down the phone. I was like, oh, how long will it take for them to realize that I don't have any younger brothers? Turns out 2 hours. A knock on my door. I just took all of my shit and jumped off the balcony and ran away. But that was, you know, that was like part of this period of making art for me. Because basically just around that time, I got my first like big freelance gig working with Unknown Worlds here in San Francisco. Wonderful people. I'm in touch with them like up to this day. And yeah, I was just making textures. And so I found a place to like whatever sleep that night, and then I had to come back because I had work to do. And so the way I would structure it is during the day, I would just like not open the door if someone knocks. I lived by myself, so you know there's no one there else. And at night, because the police would do rounds and like check for lights in the windows, I moved all of my computer setup under the desk and built like a pillow fort around it so no light would leak. And then I would just work laying on the floor, making these awesome things. And it was a lot of fun. Actually, another funny story. Couldn't quite figure out how to make this like gooey alien meeting materials, so I went to a store and bought every kind of ham, and I just put it in a scanner, and so that's what you're seeing. But I think it works out. They look pretty gross. Yeah, and then this happened. So that was presidential election in Belarus in 2010, I believe. And that was the night where I think around 800 people were arrested, including 6 presidential candidates that all of a sudden were, the enemy of the state on the night of the election. And it's just, I don't know, a lot of people beaten up, the usual story. But the weirdest part is, at that point, I felt somewhat, I guess, capable. I was more of a grown-up, I was like around my 20s, and I felt like me not being there was weighing hard on me. And it's interesting because I had nowhere to put it, so I put it on Polycount. It was a community of game artists where we talk about game art every day, but I just shared there. And, and artists, just like many of you, I'm sure, were extremely supportive, and a lot of people reached out and trying to figure out ways to get me to come to America, but it doesn't work that easy. But it's just, I guess, another sort of example that we build these communities through our passion without realizing that we're actually becoming a support group and a friend group for each other by the virtue of just having a shared thing that we love, and that was wonderful. And so I was making some more freelance art, doing some cartoony things, which was really fun. Some props, some aliens, some bears, obviously. Then I got to actually model and texture the main character for this game that never came out, and I was really happy. But then, okay, this happened. After hiding from police for that was a year, where I was like, okay, making sure I'm not busted. Friends of friends somewhere were like, oh, okay, we have some connections. You can just come in, and they will, wouldn't be anything bad. And so I came in, and they told me that I need to appear at a conscription office, right, for my medical evaluation. They were like, please don't betray the motherland again, but go to the medical evaluation for, just to determine your military fitness. And then the plan was that I'm just gonna fake scoliosis, and I'm just gonna be, I'm just gonna have a very bad back. And the way you do that is you just walk up to an X-ray. When you do an X-ray, you just kind of do this, and then they take an X-ray, and it's so freaking obvious. It was so obvious that they sent me to a military hospital to force a medical evaluation where I wouldn't be able to fudge it. I still kept fudging it to a point where they literally sent me to the army general that ran the hospital. It was literally the last person. And it is a fascinating story because I was sitting in his office and I was looking at my case file. And on the cover, and this was a case file from university. And it said, discharge for gross discipline violations or something like that. And he was like, oh, what does that mean? I was like, oh, I took a sabbatical and never came back. He was like, why did you do that? Because I wanted to make art. And then he went through my case, and I had super high SAT scores, and he was like, what was wrong with you? What are you doing with your life? And we just sat there, and I told him about game art and video games and how cool it is. And he listened to it for about an hour, and then he just looked at me and was like, yeah, you don't belong in the army. I was like, okay, scoliosis, yeah. Well, thank you. But, so I got a 3-year delay, so I still had a timer to get out of the country. But it was very nice of him. It's an amazing story of how, you get to a final boss that's supposed to be the bad boss, but you just talk to him about what you love, and all of a sudden you find a human connection. So I guess let's talk about what we love more often, if we can. But yeah, and then I kept doing more art, working on my portfolio, and getting kind of decent. I could model some things. And then there's another contest on Polycount. So made this environment. I don't know if anyone recognizes it. It was a remake of the battle stage from Soul Calibur 3. It's the Water Wheel Valley, I think it was called. And so learned a lot of lessons. It was really interesting. Also set to Final Fantasy music. I'm sorry, not sorry. And yeah, so it was just, I felt okay, I'm getting decent, I should kind of get a job. But we'll get to it, because then this thing happened. Sorry, I promise these are all real, by the way. So this is a headline from NBC, a real headline that someone in Belarus was arrested for clapping, and that person had just one hand. And it was around the time where the government outlawed clapping. So there was about a year where clapping was illegal. And the reason that happened was because public assemblies of any kind were prohibited. And so people would just organize on social media, just show up at a place, all clap together and leave. And so that was like a protest, but it was like a therapy group for everybody just to know they're not alone. And the government had no idea what to do with it. And so they just started patrolling the streets and like arresting people for clapping. And so I went to each one of those protests. And but most of them ended up like this. You know, that was just an example of how most of them transpired. And once again, it's just that overwhelming sense of powerlessness as people are just like dragged away next to you. And yeah, there's nothing you can do. And I remember the first time somebody got arrested in front of me for just like taking a cell phone picture is, I don't know, it's like a watershed moment in your brain because you're like, oh, is this really happening, right? And then, yeah, it's just mostly people getting carried away and whatever, women, children, I don't know, because don't you dare clap in public. Yeah, so, you know, that was that. And at the same time, as I was saying, like, I felt like I was getting kind of decent at art. There's some good friends online, like, saying, like, hey, how the hell are you still job hunting? And I had no idea, but I was getting so desperate because I was run out of every kind of money that I had. I literally had this on my DeviantArt page, just like a homeless person with a cardboard, just saying like, hey, can I please do some art? Yeah, and then I had a brilliant idea of just removing any geographic reference to where I am, like from all of my resumes and online presence. And all of a sudden, I started getting messages. You know, it was like, oh, do you want to work on the next Call of Duty? Like, can we please hire you? I was like, yeah, great. I'm in Belarus. You know, crickets. And then, yeah, friends would recommend me to studios, like whatever Ubisoft didn't work out. Then I got an art test from Epic, and I tried my best. I don't think I was that good, but it was hilarious because I couldn't quite render that much geometry. Because if you remember, like Gears of War, the OG, like it was just high poly on a high poly with a high poly. And so I literally had to like take a screen grab of the viewport in 3ds Max and then like paint ambient occlusion by hand because my computer was just exploding. So it didn't quite work out. But it was, I don't know, it was just a crazy time because I do remember coming home from one of these protests and getting that rejection letter from Epic and just like collapsing on the floor crying. But there was a life lesson that I actually find to be very helpful, and that is that hey, life's not fair, you know, like it's not supposed to be, you know, it's kind of ironic in a way because hanging out once again on the polycounts, people would complain that the UK games industry is dead, I can't get a job anywhere, and I'd just be like, ugh, sucks to be you, man. But at the same time, the other thing that was very interesting throughout all of this is that I was the happiest I've ever been because I got to do the thing I loved every day, day in and day out, get up every morning and just make art, and then make better art, and then figure out where I suck and just like, make more art. And so, you know, aside from kind of starving and, you know, the dictatorship thing, it was a really nice way to live. But I did have to figure it out. And so I got this art test from a company called Gameloft in Montreal. And you know, this whole scene has less triangles than Drake's stubble in Uncharted 4. Like, this is 3,400 triangles in this entire scene. And yeah, it was just the port, I guess. And so it was supposed to run on an iPhone. It was made, once again, in Unreal, and just some cool, clever tricks. And yeah, but that was just an example. By the way, the reflections are counting towards the poly count because the scene was literally like mirrored down. Because, you know, no ray tracing. And so, yeah, so that got on like Polycount front page, got a bunch of views on YouTube. I obviously got the job in Montreal. And that was really cool. But the interesting thing, so me and my team, we went to Uganda a couple of years ago to set up like a masterclass just to teach kids art, like a 2-day thing. And somebody asked me, well, what felt like your biggest failure? And ironically, that. Because to me, it felt like giving up in so many ways, because I could not get a job at any of the places that I was really passionate about. You know, Rockstar never called back, failed that Epic test. And so it was fascinating because, yeah, it was a way out of Belarus, which was great. But at the same time, it felt like this big failure that I had to sort of grapple with and figure out just how to be better. But yeah, so 12 months later, I was allowed in Canada because of visa things. And then, you know, 5 years later, I was art directing some of my favorite games. And so it kind of worked out. We had a good time, and then a little later, I got a chance to start Promethean AI, where we make technology for artists and kind of try to democratize storytelling and empower more people to do art the way they see fit, and just accelerate and empower. But on top of that, let's see how we're doing for time. Okay, you can watch that online if you want to. There's a lot of cool stuff, but I'm just gonna jump a little bit ahead. We got to help more people, right? We went to Uganda. We did some tests of our artificial intelligence with the folks there. We taught art. We just hung out with people that like art and also live in a dictatorship country. Like that's how we bonded. It's like, hey, what can we do? And it was a really lovely time. And so all of these videos are on our website if you want to check them out. But then 2020 rolled around. So that was 2020 in Belarus. Another presidential election. Only this time, the same guy that's in power was in power for 26 years. Nobody believed for a second that he won. A lot more people on the streets. A lot more violent crackdown from police. A bunch of people dead. It was not a great time at all. And obviously being sort of in the safety of, well, being here in States, it still was very hard to just like stay impartial and just not do anything, just watch from the sidelines. And so it was interesting. We were working on some things at Promethean. So at Promethean, right, we make artificial intelligence to help people build virtual worlds. And the whole premise internally for us is we want to help people tell their stories. We want to make it easier to make games, to make awesome art so that anybody can share what they have on their mind. And so we had this idea internally that we should be telling stories for people that can tell their own for now, until we can get the tools out that are fully ready. We'll just do that. And so after looking at all of that, and then especially this. So this lady, she's basically saying that the scariest thing that she's ever experienced is her daughter being covered in blood, screaming, "Mom, I don't want to die." She's pulling her out of the car. And then literally like that, like the moment we saw that, it was a Thursday, I was like, okay, we got to do something. So I wrote this little script on Thursday. On Friday, we booked a volumetric capture studio. On Saturday, I went to a protest in support of Belarus in Los Angeles and just like talked to random strangers, asking them to be in the VR experience so that we can use their likeness and just be actors. And then on Monday, we were shooting. And so this is just some of the BTS, and it's like a volumetric capture volume. There's like 15 infrared cameras, and then a bunch of just actual cameras. So we're capturing not just video, but like full 3D that we can reconstruct with all of the textures. And so that allowed us to just move really quickly. The scariest part was that all of these people were from Belarus. They understood what's going on, and so it was just a terrible day on set because everyone is living through these things sort of remotely, vicariously. And and just making anyone cry for 10 takes is never a good time. And so, but at the same time, everybody felt like we were doing something useful. We were contributing. And so at the end, we basically got all of the captures from these, and we kind of made an edit of all of the takes before we convert them to 3D. And because the volume was so small, everybody had to be captured separately, and then we would do some clever trickery to kind of put them back together. And and we captured audio at the same time as well. And it looked like it was working out. We built the environment in like a day because, well, we make environments. Like that's our thing. So that was really quick. Same with the car interior. Bought a car off some asset store, just quickly uploaded some materials, did some modeling, good to go. Bought some character of some asset store, made sure that it's riggable to the VR hands, and then we're good to go. And then we started getting back the actual volumetric captures, and it looked really promising. And so we're like, okay, cool, this is working out. And this is all once again happening like in a span of a few days. Like it's the same week that we shot that we're getting all of this back. And then this happened, where we realized that the technology we licensed and paid a whole bunch of money for was just not working. Like it was just crash. And it's an interesting point that I want to talk about because even working at, in the industry, at studios like Naughty Dog or just talking to other people, there's always this disconnect when we're making technology sort of between its utility and its accessibility, right? Like a lot of technology gets the job done, but the human cost of interacting with that technology is immense. It's bulky, it's unwieldy, it's slow, it's unintuitive, everybody has a million workarounds. And so even back then, I would always try to bring it back to these conversations that making technology is a responsibility, because if you're making it in a video game studio, if you don't do a good job, somebody doesn't get to go home that night to, tuck their kids in for the night because they're there working their ass off to ship that game because somebody couldn't be bothered to make good tech. And so it's so fascinating to find ourselves in this situation where, you're like, oh, well, I wonder who's going to go to jail for this if we do it, but my biggest problem is that company X can't write, software to save their life. And so it was a long story of how they did not fix it, and so I had to do some hacks to make it work, at least for the capture. And then we put it out. You saw the result. And so the weekend it came out, the internet in Belarus was shut down. So the government was just cracking down on the internet, and that was about a week and a half after we started shooting. And the only way people could share stuff was Telegram and Instagram. And so about 1 million people saw it the weekend it came out in a country of 9 million people. And it was kind of fascinating just to watch the reaction, because I think a lot of people just never stop to think for a moment what all of these things that we sort of adults participate in socially look like from a child's perspective, because we're so convinced like, oh, the conservatives versus the leftists, or these guys versus those guys. And when you just like take a step back and just imagine what it's like being a child growing up through all of this, it kind of shifts your perspective. And then a lot of people, left some heartwarming but also heartbreaking comments. There's a lot of nasty comments as well. And all kinds of death threats and stuff like that. But we'll talk about it in a little bit. But here's the thing that we took away from this that was very interesting. And that is that because it's fully digital, we can technically, if we can find out the people that actually perpetrated all of these things that we're recreating, we can recreate them digitally with their actual faces and just put them in there and then donate it to a museum so that people can indefinitely re-experience these things and, know their heroes. And it felt like a very compelling idea because all of a sudden it brought back that idea of individual responsibility that a lot of people wearing masks usually try very hard to abdicate from. And so I started brainstorming on that, but also in a more cost-effective manner than the previous situation was. And then as I was doing that, this happened. There's more demonstrations in Belarus. Oh, and by the way, as they're happening, I'm just gonna highlight that's like the asshole in chief back there walking around the streets with a gun, just high-fiving the soldiers, saying we'll get them. And so the feeling that everyone's got, or at least me in particular at that time, was that it felt like they're gonna start shooting a lot more people than they were, and it was very scary. And the implication was that we want to figure out what we can do, right? How we can help. And so taking that previous idea that we've seen with how can we bring back that idea of individual responsibility? I started tinkering on a side project, took a week, and then released this, which is basically a collection of viral videos that were kind of going around. So this is 2 policemen, they beat this 15-year-old and then they were threatening people with a grenade for recording this. But the interesting part was that a lot of people online were just dumping information about anyone they knew that has anything to do with the armed forces. And so we could scrape that, and then using a little bit of AI, we could actually run through and try to find some matches. But then to make it more interesting, we added the facial reconstruction so that they can actually look at their face doing their job. And and so as you can see, it's paired with their actual home addresses and phone numbers and stuff like that. And so I just compiled the whole thing and put it up online. And so as you can imagine, these gentlemen weren't too happy. KGB weren't too happy. Russian FSB also wasn't too happy. But it was interesting to watch because for the first time, I think, maybe even ever, right, that idea that we're abused by technology, by the big brother, we can use the same technology to abuse them right back. And the fact that I think for at least a couple of weeks, you could literally see some of these policemen on the streets in scuba gear or sunglasses because they were just terrified of being identified. But going back to that guy, we managed to find him too, which was good. But it's interesting because fundamentally, right, it's it's an art project, right? You can technically just paint that. There's like all of this artificial intelligence bonanza it was just faster, right? But the entire idea that what we do as artists, right, is our job is to hold a mirror up to our audience's soul. Like that's what we do, that's what we get paid for. And so the fact that we could provide that and just, I guess, think along those lines was important to us, I guess. Just thinking along the lines of making art useful, making art serve a purpose, have a utility. And so after this came out, once again, all hell broke loose. This is like state TV propaganda show about how Andrew is a traitor to the motherland, and also he's stupid because he makes video games. I've actually never seen it. That's just how it's been described to me. But, you know, and then after a little while further, the Ministry of Interior released a video of this scary gentleman in a hood, all black, just saying that, you know, they know who I am, and if I ever come back to Belarus, I'll be made responsible for my treacherous actions. And basically, that was like a day at work. Like I sent this picture to the team, and I'm like, you guys, I'm gonna need this morning like to sort some shit out. Yeah, and so that was a very unexpected turn for a lot of this, I guess. But I get this question a bunch, which is, you know, if you could do it again, would you do it? And I really don't want to make light of the fact that as a fallout from all of this, more than one life has been altered in a way that's, you know, irreversible. And it's easy to take decisions for yourself. It's much harder to live with the responsibility of knowing that the decision you made have affected other people in some very adverse ways. And so it's not an easy thing to live with, but at the same time, the answer is actually this. Like that's what I think about when I get asked that question. And this lady right here, her name is Harriet Beecher Stowe, and she wrote a book. And she was invited to the White House because of that book she wrote. And that was during the Civil War. And Abe Lincoln, presumably, or as it's sort of, you know, being reported further in history, greeted her with the words, "Is this the little lady that started the big war?" Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it was a book that changed a lot of the social sentiment in America in regards to slavery and made a war to end it possible because more people supported it and could connect and relate to the idea that we need to change something in society. And I think about her all the time because I wonder what is our Uncle Tom's Cabin? We do art. We spend ungodly amounts of money making art and content. What is our version of that? And what are we doing to get there? And it's interesting because it's been understood with art, right? That's kind of what we do in a lot of ways. And so this is Woody Guthrie, and during the 40s, he would, you know, play music with his guitar saying what it says, but it was very clear that he understood that sort of the war against fascism is a cultural one, because that was the conversation, that was the discussion. And, you know, he had a protege named Bob Dylan who became a quote-unquote voice of the generation. And so they were quite successful in communicating these stories and changing the social sentiment. And yeah, and so I've been thinking about that a lot, but also in this context. So this is my very first GDC. I was talking about art. It's a very long time ago. And so the question that I had there was, right, is like, what is beauty? And why does it exist? And let's kind of try and break it down and understand why do we need it. But then kind of the next step of that, right, like thinking from there was like, what is art? And why do we need art? Like evolutionary-wise, right? Like we're well-fed, we're secure, we can do science and like make our life better. Why do we bother with art? And I never had that question. Like that was always on my mind and kind of going back to that thinking. And then, you know, I had kind of scatterbrained ideas, and then I ran into this book that was very interesting. I think it's making its round. It's pretty popular. Hopefully some of you have read it. But I think the core premise of the book, I mean, there's a lot of smart things in there, obviously, but one of the core premises of the book is that our main differentiating factor as a species is that we can tell stories. Because other animals can communicate, you know, there are primates that can not just communicate, but they can lie to each other, you know, pretend there's a predator somewhere to steal someone's bananas. So like there's all kinds of complex social behavior, but the one thing they cannot do is tell stories. And the interesting thing with stories is that fundamentally they are a tool for collaboration. That's how we as humans build magical things, because if we tell the right story, then generations over generations of people can continue the same work and keep building up on that progress so that all of us can have a better life. And so when we think about that, we kind of realize that we are all made out of stories. Everything we love, everything we think we hate, our cultures, our countries, our financial systems are all just stories. And stories are told by you guys, are told by artists. And it was very interesting because it's kind of like a rude awakening for me, I guess, in regards to that understanding was this particular comment. So, I got a lot of sort of weird, vile comments on a lot of these videos, and that was just one of them. But the interesting thing is that I decided to click through, because usually I would just delete them. I decided to click through and just see what the account has, what kind of videos or something. And it turned out that that person had an ArtStation link. And I was like, oh, that is interesting. And so, went to check it out. And it was weird because I felt so hurt because, I don't know, I'm used to not having a country or home, but artists are my home in so many ways, these are the people that, I don't know, I feel most kinship with. And I did something I'm not very proud of. I messaged the guy and I was like, you do realize that that could, ruin your chances of gainful employment in the industry if you keep doing things like that. And it's interesting because the guy wrote back, and he wrote back basically that he couldn't care less, that he the entire country is behind him, and he's protecting the country from assholes like me that have sold out to the West. I'm still waiting for my check, by the way, from Pentagon from all of this. I still haven't gotten it, but and it was so amazing because all of a sudden it hit me that we had no shared reality between us, right? His perception of the world has been shaped by the stories on TV that he's been consuming for years and years and years, and there's just no common facts that we could discuss. Our realities were fundamentally different, and he was convinced that the country's under attack and that everyone's trying to destroy the, whatever, conservative way of life back there. And it was very justified, and he was like, you deserve everything that's coming your way and stuff like that. And it was scary, but also very eye-opening in so many ways for me because it's just stories. All of the ways we disagree, all of the reasons we disagree is because someone somewhere told a better story, which means that, there's a way to fix this. The first more boring point on how we can fix this is I'm just still going back to that, right? Because I kind of laid out how we made this project, and we made it in, a week and a half. And I think it's probably the shortest ever production for a virtual reality experience, and probably one of the first ever virtual reality experience that happened while the event was still happening in the real world. You could experience it while someone on the other end of the planet was living it. And that was very interesting, but that still required a lot of complicated expertise. It required a decent chunk of money for the volumetric video capture. And and so our focus, right, what I do for a living is basically trying to figure out how to make technology that will help people make these experiences easier, faster, simpler through an interface that is more human, that is more accessible. And in this case, once again, this is a virtual reality demo that we have. Obviously, not a lot of applications for this today, right? People use this in actual game development with a console and stuff like that. But the fact that we're doing it is important because we are trying to bring that barrier down for more people should be able to tell their stories, because that is how we push back against all of the stories that are, I guess, less than constructive. And the interesting part is that we have an internship program at Promethean, and because we have this technology that allows us to very quickly build worlds, we all of a sudden find ourselves, even today, right, working with our interns, and most of our conversations are not about how to model, how to click this button, sculpt this and that. We're talking about composition. We're talking about color. We're talking about what they're trying to communicate. We're getting back to the whys of we do the art that we do, and I feel like in order to facilitate more constructive, creative, empathetic world, having better technology to do that is so fundamental. But then the other part that kind of comes with that, right, is that idea and that responsibility that we don't always have to entertain. There's a lot of economical pressure for us too, obviously, and that's fine, and not everyone's going to want to do it, not even 5%, but 3% is enough. 3% of anything makes a difference in pretty much everything in the world. And so if there's one thing, I guess, I'm hoping to impart here, right, is that is that we can try to tell stories that deconstruct the bad stories. Because every single person that does something terrible is convinced that in their story they're the good guy. They're convinced that they're on the side of the right, and the best thing you can do to diffuse them, to sort of neutralize their desire to do terrible things, is make it impossible for them to perceive themselves as doing something good. And you do that with art. You do that with technology. You do that with an experience where they get to see themselves through the eye of a 5-year-old girl that gets to experience them, quote unquote, doing their work. And if we can do more of that, then we can make it that much harder for people to be assholes to each other. And that is kind of the whole point, right? If we do this interactive entertainment thing right, we're building empathy machines. Every single one of us, every single person that just sits down to play a video game is saying, I'm going to experience what it's like to be someone else right now. And if we can help them get a reflection of their reality back, or some kind of experience that could make them reconsider how they treat other people, then I think we can do some magical things. And so, yeah, if there's takeaways, it's this, that sometimes you can make art to challenge, you can make art to inform, you can make art to improve, you can make art to stand up for someone, you can make art to, you know, punch evil in the throat and kick it in the shins. And the most useful advice I've ever found when people ask me, like, oh, how do we do more of that? Like, how do I start with that? Where do I even approach this? Is this question. It's my most favorite question in the world, and I ask it to as many people as I can. And it's this: what experience from your life do you wish that other people could have that would make the world a better place? Because all of us had experiences that were less than pleasant. All of us had something happen to them where you thought, if only other people understood how I'm feeling right now, probably they wouldn't have done that. Probably the world could have been a little better, a little different. I think every one of us has their own version of that question, their own version of that answer, their own version of a story that if you just do that, that is your empathy machine. That is how you make the world better, by just letting other people walk a mile in your shoes and see what it's like. And so, don't think for a moment that your art can change the world, because it is the only thing that ever really has. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, I think we have 3 minutes. Hello.
Howdy. The U.S. game market, of course, has a lot of intersection with the U.S. military, because everything in the U.S. does.
Sure.
How do you as an individual and Promethean AI as a company sort of navigate around that and avoid becoming complicit in some of the same stuff that you've, battled in your life?
That is an interesting question. So the question is, right, how do you avoid, I guess, working with the military, because it's so prevalent in a lot of spheres here in the US? And honestly, the question is, we just don't. Like, we did have some offers for some projects, and I mean, it kind of helps that I'm not a US citizen, so I don't have security clearance. But also, no, like, it's just not something we want to do. But I think conceptually, right, is, I don't know, it's not even just about the military, right? There's a lot of things that people on different teams have different opinions on, and something that I'm really happy about is that on our team, we get to have these conversations. We talk with the team, like that video that you've seen, right? Even people that don't directly contribute content, like one of our engineers wrote a piece of music that is used in that video, because he's from Sweden. He couldn't, it doesn't concern him as much, but he felt like he wanted to contribute. And so because we vocalize internally and have these discussions, that what we're building is a way to generate empathy, to facilitate a happier, more inclusive world, then we can talk what we find important. We can have our disagreements, and then we can work on things that we all agree on, and hopefully, make progress in the areas where we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, if that's no more questions, then I guess this is it. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming.